Iraqi mines damaged 2 American warships, but both vessels managed to stay afloat.
On the ground, Allied troops continue preparing for a possible offensive, one that may come very soon.
And here at home, thousands gather at the state capitol to show their support for U.S. policy and the troops who are carrying it out. Hello, I'm Stan Atkinson.
Hello, I'm Carol Bland.
5 o'clock. We have news for you. Next.
It's 5 p.m. and you're watching KCRA, Channel 3, where the news comes first. With Stan Atkinson, Carol Bland, meteorologist Rick Griffin, and Walt Gray with sports. This is Channel 3 Reports.
U.S. troops on the move in the Mideast as preparations for a ground war quicken. Tonight, the possibility of such a move seems all the more likely. While most Americans celebrated the President's Day holiday today, Allied troops continued the business of war, not only on land, but also on the sea and in the air. On the sea, 2 U.S. Navy ships hit floating mines in the Persian Gulf today, resulting in injuries and damage, but the ships remain afloat. In the air, U.S. warplanes carried out more bombing raids around Baghdad. And as Allied ground forces continue to position for a possible ground attack, Iraq's foreign minister returned from his meeting with Soviet leader Gorbachev, bringing with him a peace plan, but so far as we know, no breakthrough. Tonight we have a series of reports on events in the Mideast and reaction here at home. We begin our coverage with reporter Charles Ziwi, who joins us live by satellite from Saudi Arabia. Charles?
Carol, maximum readiness. That's the description at this hour that U.S. officials are placing on troop readiness. They're ready to go into combat in a big way. All they're waiting on is word from President Bush to do it, to cross the border into Kuwait to begin retaking that country. As you said, there was action offshore today at sea. 2 ships were damaged by floating mines, one the USS Princeton, the other the USS Tripoli.
The mine blasted a 15 by 20-foot hole in the forward starboard side of the helicopter carrier, which is part of a 31-ship task force gearing up for a possible marine amphibious assault.
All I heard was a huge explosion, and it kind of threw me out of my rack, and I was like, oh man, this is it. We hit a mine. And...
The explosion touched off instant confusion. Officers rushed to calm damage control crews.
The important thing is, guys, the ship is safe. We're stable right now. Now it's just time to do what we've been trained to do, okay? We're in a very safe, stable condition.
2 forward compartments, one housing a diesel engine and the other paint thinner, were flooded, but the ship was in no danger of sinking.
I think it is true testimony to the ship's company, the rapid way that they went to their general quarter stations, did what they were trained to do, did it quickly, professionally, and limited the damage so that we continue to operate the ship.
4 sailors aboard the Tripoli were injured, 1 seriously. Nearby, 3 other sailors aboard the guided missile cruiser Princeton were injured when that vessel also struck a mine. Meanwhile, across the Saudi desert, thousands of infantry, artillery, and armored units are repositioning daily in preparation for a ground offensive, oblivious to diplomatic maneuverings to end the war before they're sent in.
We're going to take them out. We're going to push them out.
We're just going to keep moving until we get to Baghdad. When we get there, we're going to find a payphone and call home.
All along the desert frontier, skirmishes between U.S. and Iraqi troops intensified over the weekend, with Iraqi troops likely sizing up Allied strength, engaging in a series of firefights. To date, the Allies have flown more than 80,000 sorties in the month-long aerial bombardment, and the attacks will likely continue while Iraq considers the peace plan.
And Stan, those troops continue to maneuver along the border at this hour, maneuvering so that the Iraqis can't get a good handle on their exact positions. But firefights and various skirmishes are continuing tonight, we're told, as the preparations continue for that big ground war. Back to you.
Does sound like it's getting closer. In the Gulf, what is the minesweeping operation there?
Well, it's sort of ironic, and it's a deadly twist on the whole thing, Stan. They had known that there were mines out there. The Tripoli today was out leading a group of ships trying to sweep the mines, and then it ran into a string of these mines tethered from the bottom, about 4 or 5 of them, they think, that Iraq had put there some time ago, not only because of the Gulf War, but because of its, perhaps as long ago as its war with Iran, to try to interrupt commercial shipping and to play havoc with whatever vessels came into the northern Gulf.
So at least today we learned a little more about what to look for. Huh?
There is still danger out offshore for the naval vessels. And there's also worry, by the way, that some of the helicopters that Saddam Hussein has yet to throw into battle in a big way, and some of the planes that he's holding on the ground in Iran might somehow become airborne, and using Exocet missiles might be able to do even more damage to the ships offshore, especially when they come in close to launch the troops on that Allied invasion.
Okay, Charles, thanks for the update. Meantime, elsewhere, we have a Soviet peace plan that's on the table tonight, a peace plan that is being hand-carried from Moscow to Baghdad. To find out more about it, we turn to the other part of our Middle East coverage tonight from Channel 3's Roy Stearns. Roy, what do we know about this peace plan? I mean, does it meet the conditions of the demands of the UN withdrawal policy?
You've got the questions that everybody are asking tonight, all the way from here to Moscow. What we know about the peace plan is very little. And what very little that we do know that has been revealed seems to indicate that it may conform to the UN demands, may conform. Or at least that is what official Moscow is telling the world. And we must now wait for the plan to be delivered before we find out exactly what it is. Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz is now on his way back to Baghdad from Moscow. He is carrying with him what a Soviet spokesman calls a detailed and sensible plan to end the war. Aziz met with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev earlier today for 3.5 hours, reportedly discussing the details of the Soviet proposal, details that have not been released. However, a Gorbachev spokesman said it is fully in line with a UN resolution calling for Iraq's unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait and should be acceptable to the U.S. and the Allies.
We'll just have to wait for the initial reaction of the U.S. and the Allies. The plan foresees political means, and it is highly unlikely that it will fail to suit any party.
The spokesman made it clear that the Soviet Union supports the Allied stance of unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. He added that Aziz accepted the plan with what he called understanding and will present it to Saddam Hussein, with Moscow wanting an answer without delay. In the meantime, President Bush was at his main retreat of Kennebunkport when he got the news. These pictures taken during a presidential walk on the beach. The Soviets said they did not discuss the plan in advance with the president or the Allies, and President Bush refused comment here. And upon arrival back in Washington, he immediately went into a meeting with his top advisors. But barring what one U.S. source called a very dramatic turnaround by Iraq, the air war over Baghdad continued overnight, and the ground war has grown closer. These pictures are of troops of the British 1st Armored Division, practicing for what they say may be a foxhole-to-foxhole bayonet battle with holdout elements of Saddam Hussein's Republican Guards. But this is what Saddam Hussein will face next: massive amounts of Allied armor now on the move. Well, back on that Soviet peace plan, the Soviets have now sent a secret cable copy to the White House saying they will not comment because the Soviets want it to remain secret for now. But a German newspaper says in addition to the unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait, the Soviet plan also calls for guarantees that Iraq will maintain its borders. What borders is that question? That Iraq and Saddam Hussein will not be punished further for invading Kuwait. What about war crimes trials? Question. And that the Palestinian question will be discussed later, maybe after withdrawal, unknown. And now, that's what you heard from a German newspaper about the Soviet peace plan, but there's now some doubt about exactly what that newspaper is reporting and whether or not those things that I just told you are accurate, because while the plan sounds good, the White House has just released a statement that says President Bush sees nothing in the plan to warrant stopping the Gulf War. Oh. So, again, we're back to more questions than answers.
Well, of course, you have to wait for Saddam Hussein's reaction anyway.
We do.
And his interpretation of what it all says.
That's right.
No matter the message that Tariq Aziz may bring to Baghdad.
And they, as they say in TV, film at 11.
Yeah. Could be a while before that's all figured out. Thank you, Roy. Well, choosing this patriotic holiday, thousands of demonstrators held rallies in Northern California today, some against the war, others in favor of U.S. Gulf policy. First, let's go to the Bay Area, where about 100 anti-war demonstrators marched through the streets of San Francisco today. Led by a coalition of religious leaders, the group sang and carried banners to the gates of the Presidio Army base. There they were confronted by military police. Officers arrested 30 protesters for trespassing on federal property. In the meantime, a much larger crowd gathered at the state capitol today. It was a boisterous demonstration to show support for the U.S. and its war policy and the troops who are carrying that out. State police put the crowd at between 6,000 and 7,000. We have more on that story now from Channel 3's Steve Swat.
With the Gulf War intensifying 10,000 miles away, a show of support for the war effort here at home. USA! USA! Thousands of enthusiastic, flag-waving demonstrators rallied at the state capitol to send messages across the world. Messages to the troops overseas, to the families left behind, and to the dictator of Iraq. President Bush sent a letter to the rally reiterating that our message in the Gulf is the liberation of Kuwait. But some here, including Governor Wilson, said liberating Kuwait doesn't go far enough.
Our goal must be more than simply restoring the sovereignty of Kuwait. We must bring down Saddam Hussein. We must see that he is no longer a threat to the safety and to the peace of the people of that region.
A former Kurdish rebel whose mother escaped Iraq after the invasion of Kuwait said there's a sizable but silent resistance movement. What did she say about any resistance movement inside there?
There's a lot of resistance going on. But, you know, they are afraid of mass destruction like chemical if he uses. That's why they won't go forward very, rapidly. They're going slowly, though.
The strongest invective came from wounded Vietnam veteran B.T. Collins, who said this event sends a message to those who protest America's war policy.
You tell him and every other whining, sniveling dirtbag that you love this country.
Rally organizers said they hope news coverage of this event finds its way to Baghdad so that Iraqi leaders understand the level of support for the war effort. In any event, videotapes of the rally are being sent to the troops overseas. At the state capitol, Steve Swat, Channel 3 reports.
And so to sum up the situation in the Mideast to the moment, Iraq's foreign minister on his way back to Baghdad after a meeting in Moscow, a Soviet official says the peace plan offered does call for Iraq's unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. 2 American warships based in Southern California struck mines in the Persian Gulf today. The ships are still afloat. 7 sailors were hurt, though. Meantime, Allied air raids continue over Baghdad, and an F-16 fighter jet crashed inside Iraq, but the pilot was rescued safely by Allied forces. Meantime, we continue to monitor both NBC and CNN around the clock here, waiting for the latest information on the Mideast war. Stay with us. We'll have complete double coverage and live updates as the events warrant. Our next in-depth coverage coming up next on NBC Nightly News, following us here at 6.
And we have much more to come as we continue on this Monday holiday evening. Just ahead, Kent Pierce explains why some Sacramento leaders worry about floods, even though we're in the middle of a record drought.
We'll also explain why federal investigators will look into last week's fiery tanker truck accident in Carmichael.
This week, the kind of storm that we only get every few decades flooded much of Northern California, and it threatened to flood a whole lot more of it. As a result, the Federal Emergency Management Agency ordered Sacramento officials to greatly improve flood control or else face a building moratorium. Tonight, Channel 3's Kent Pierce has some developments involving a key part of a flood control plan, that proposed dam on the American River at Auburn.
On the banks of the American River, the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency focused on the need to comply with the federal mandate and improve flood protection. They say 5 years of drought should not lull the area into a false sense of security, that history can repeat itself. 1986 had been a dry year until mid-February. Then a huge storm dumped rain continuously on Northern California. Proponents say a dam at Auburn would have prevented the disaster, but what kind of dam?
We've agreed that we need an Auburn dam, but not the full multi-purpose Auburn dam. We hope that we can get a dry dam with expandable capacity.
I think flood control is a necessary first step. And after flood control, hopefully the studies will be completed enough to where we can continue construction and complete a multi-purpose facility.
A coalition of environmental groups endorses a smaller version of the flood control dam on the American. They say the one proposed now is in fact a multi-purpose dam in everything but name.
We have no confidence whatsoever that it will remain a flood control facility. It will essentially be a second bathtub ring on the American River Canyon.
Advocates say Auburn Dam must be built to prevent floods when there's too much water and to store water when there isn't enough. In Sacramento, Kent Pierce, Channel 3 reports.
No matter what kind of dam is built at the Auburn site, it will cost at least $800 million. And where that money will come from is, at the moment, a complete unknown.
A team of federal investigators is in Sacramento now to look into last week's big tanker truck accident and fire in Carmichael. A huge fire erupted on Wednesday morning after a gasoline truck carrying nearly 9,000 gallons of fuel tipped over. 5 homes were damaged or destroyed near Fair Oaks Boulevard. Investigators with the National Transportation Safety Board say they hope to issue a report on the incident with recommendations on how it can be avoided in the future. Investigator Robert Traynor was surprised to learn that there were only 3 minor injuries as a result of the accident.
There weren't fatalities or more serious injuries. Again, I say that if there had been a residence there in that dirt field or a home, it's hard to say what would have happened.
The NTSB says it'll conclude its investigation in 6 to 9 months. The driver of the overturned tanker hasn't been charged. The Highway Patrol believes he was driving too fast when he lost control of his truck. 2 people were taken to UC Davis Medical Center today after an apparent drunk driving accident in the north area of Sacramento. Witnesses say a pickup truck crashed into another car in the 2400 block of Rio Linda about 12:30 today. The second car apparently pulled over to the side of the road with its hazards lights on. That apparently was when the pickup smashed into the back of it. Police say the driver of the pickup had been drinking. Now it's time to check out the homeward bound commute, if there is one, in and around Sacramento tonight. Mark Dinger with a live report from Metro Traffic. Apparently there is something of a reverse traffic flow tonight, right?
Well, you mentioned a homeward bound, Stan. I don't know, homeward bound for who? It appears a lot of traffic coming down from the foothills tonight, a kind of reverse pattern on our freeways. Right now, you should be busy for eastbound 50 between Howe and Watt Avenue, but that's not really the case right now. Traffic there pretty light, but traffic coming into town pretty heavy, no doubt coming home from Lake Tahoe after a 3-day weekend. About the same pattern developing up on the northeast side, where heavy traffic westbound coming into town right now and heading over to the top of town to rejoin I-80 out in West Sacramento. I'm Mark Dinger for Metro Traffic Control.
Terrorist attacks and terrorist threats in Great Britain today. They killed, injured, and shut down some major transportation centers. We'll have that story next.
You're watching KCRA, where the news comes first 24 hours a day.
1 person is dead, 40 others hurt after 2 different bombings in London today. British officials believe that the Irish Republican Army is behind the explosions that ripped through 2 railroad stations this morning. The first bomb went off at Paddington Station just before dawn. Only a handful of overnight workers were there at the time and no one was hurt. Then, about 3 hours later, during the height of morning rush hour, another bomb went off at Victoria Station.
I just heard a large explosion, and I felt the ground move from underneath my feet. And I've looked inside the station, everything seemed quiet, like for that split second, and then it was just panic chaos, and everybody came running out. So obviously my initial reaction was to look after myself.
Scotland Yard says it received a warning from a man with an Irish accent 45 minutes before the Victoria Station bombing. London's Heathrow Airport was closed for more than 2 hours today after a bomb threat, but officials say that turned out to be a hoax.
From international terrorism, we turn to a story of international cooperation tonight. Seems that more than a dozen budding entrepreneurs have spent the past month in Northern California, all learning how to start up a small business. What's different about them is the fact they're all citizens of the Soviet Union. Tonight, Channel 3's Chuck Coppola to tell us what they plan to do with their new capitalist skills.
And that should be plenty.
Ever since Elena Cholina was 10 years old, she has dreamed of running her own bakery. She's worked in Moscow as a bookkeeper, baking only part-time. But now, with more than a dozen other Soviet citizens, she is learning, shoulder to shoulder with Americans, how small business in America works, and may work in the Soviet Union.
The small business community in this country, where there are 18 million small businesses in this country, if we are the backbone and the engine of the economy here, then why can't that be the case in the Soviet Union?
In Russia, it's different. You can't call people and tell them to bring supplies and ingredients. You have to go yourself and find it in the stores. If they have it in the stores, you buy it. If they don't, you have to go to a black market and pay maybe 10 times as much.
The program is an experiment, an exchange started by American entrepreneurs.
I went on Soviet television, wrote in Soviet newspapers,
and simply said, who out there wants to start a business or has already started a business and wants some assistance from your American counterparts? And so we had hundreds and hundreds of letters come in.
There are subtleties of American business, like smiling to customers.
Still, it takes maybe a whole generation to change the whole mentality, because people are regarded not as the potential customers or clients, they regard it as the tool to meet these quotas.
And there is hope that rebuilding the Soviet economy may begin with people like Elena Kholina and Gene Khrushchev. In San Francisco, Chuck Coppola, Channel 3 reports.
NASA took another step forward today in preparation for the next mission of the space shuttle. The crew members who will fly Discovery into orbit next month arrived at the Kennedy Space Center this morning. The shuttle itself was rolled out to the launch pad last Friday. Liftoff is tentatively set for March 9th. This will be another military mission. It also will be the first space shuttle flight of 1991.
Well, back here in Northern California, more warm weather today, but is it warm enough to set a record?
Meteorologist Rick Griffin to talk about that and more about the weather now and coming up right after this. Well, weather-wise, it was unbelievable today. I mean, that you would need suntan lotion in February just defies imagination and history.
Yeah, really.
It's windy out there, too.
It was windy, and the visibility, I don't know whether you noticed that. You could see the Sierra. It was almost like they were next door.
I wonder if we've ever had a weather month like this, with so many warm, clear days.
I don't know. By the time we get finished, we may be setting some records, because in terms of rain this week, I'm afraid I have to say it looks like another dry week. Completely dry week. Last week, at least, we had a little bit of humidity, a little bit of cloud cover, but it may be tough to stir up any cloudiness of significance this week, as high pressure remains in solid control of the California weather. Well, you can see that it is warm, 72 degrees the current reading here in Sacramento at Executive Airport. It's a dry day, too, 32% the relative humidity, winds out of the northwest, and skies are clear. In Stockton, clear as well. Modesto right now, 71 degrees. And sunshine, pretty good breeze there out of the northwest as well. So it's warm here in California, but over interior sections it's quite a bit colder. For instance, at the moment, 35 degrees at Salt Lake City, 30s at Cedar City in southern Utah, and at Gallup, New Mexico, upper 60s there at Phoenix. Southern California a little cooler than we are because of the onshore winds in Los Angeles, 64, Las Vegas 61, and up to the north 30s, 40s, 50s across western Oregon, western Washington. Skies are mainly fair over California, some high cloudiness up north. Over the interior sections, the clouds are a little thicker. And this past weekend, there was anywhere from 10 to 20 to as much as 30 inches of snow in some of the mountain areas of Utah, northeast Arizona, and into Colorado and New Mexico, too. So the storms continue to pretty much go to the north of California, as you can see on the time-lapse satellite. Moisture going up into western British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon, then dropping down in a southeasterly direction into the Rocky Mountain region. So they've certainly benefited there from moisture and rain and snow the past couple of days. But our weather under the influence, again, of high pressure. And it's a very strong high-pressure system located just a couple of hundred miles off the California coast, and it's going to remain parked there throughout much of this upcoming week. The jet stream winds are meandering about. They drop down into a trough of low pressure, as we call it, through the center of the nation. So that is where the unsettled weather is today. High pressure along the west coast, and that is supporting and intensifying the surface high pressure system just to the west of California. Right now, the real wet weather, lower Mississippi Valley, showers, thunderstorms. There was a tornado watch in effect for parts of Louisiana up until about 20 minutes ago. And then farther northeast, it's a mix of rain, snow, and sleet, and tomorrow ice over northern New England, but a soaking, flooding rain in some cases, the southern Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and severe thunderstorms a possibility in the lower Mississippi Valley. Tornado season gets started pretty soon, and they may be looking at a couple tomorrow in that area. Warm for the eastern seaboard. Here in the west, mild conditions, 70s again in most areas, including San Francisco. Inland areas, 40s and 46 there at Billings and 56 degrees at Seattle. Northern Plains, upper Mississippi Valley will be kind of chilly with a 29 tomorrow at Minneapolis. So winter there, but spring-like conditions for us. Well, at least during the daylight hours in the mountains, tomorrow should be in the 50s again, which is a little bit warmer than it was today, in the upper 40s today, but up to 54 tomorrow at Truckee, 53 South Lake Tahoe, 60s again at Yosemite, and Pollock Pines should hit 63 degrees tomorrow, 55 Blue Canyon, and skies will be sunny or mostly sunny. In the foothills, clear tonight, diminishing breezes, sunny and mild tomorrow, 68 Grass Valley, 71 Jackson. In the Bay Area, fair tonight, except a little bit of cloudiness near the ocean. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, 73 Concord, 69 Santa Rosa. Lakeport will top out at 70. And for the Central Valley, diminishing winds and clear skies tonight, lows in the 40s. Tomorrow, sunny with a high of mid-70s, most areas, 74 here in Sacramento, 73 Modesto. 5-day forecast. As you can see, little change through the week. Got a chance of some cloudiness towards Friday and Saturday, but in terms of rainfall, the outlook is just not very good. Record temperatures, probably not, but the record high tomorrow is 77, so we could get within a few degrees of that anyway, and more sunshine, of course.
It feels like we could come close.
It does.
Thanks, Rick. Stay with us tonight for a late update of our top stories, including the latest from the Mideast.
We'll also have more about today's big rally at the state capitol. Who were all those people taking part today? We'll meet some of them coming up.